Hello everyone, it's RangerX64 and welcome back to another League of Legends lore reading video. Today we will be reading the lore and the biography of the Volibear, the Relentless Storm. To some, he is the thunder's roar, the great storm, or Valhyr. To others, he is ruin, the thousand-pierce bear, or he who stands. But to most of the tribes who still hold the old ways, he is known as the Volibear. Destruction, strength, and the storm made manifest, the Volibear represents the unstoppable power and fury of the Freljord itself. It was the Volibear and his demigod kin who formed the land they called Vorjard, long before the arrival of the mortal races. The sagas tell how he created the five fjords with one mighty swipe of his claws, and how his epic battle with the savage magma serpent Rod formed countless valleys and ravines. When the Volibear finally felled the beast, its blood became the first river of the Freljord, and its colossal corpse formed the Vermbak Mountains. In the days of the first tribes, wild magic ran rampant. The Volibear was venerated and worshipped by all, for they needed his indomitable strength to survive. Great wars were waged, and the Volibear took to the field alongside his followers, clad in rune-inscripted armor made by his brother Ornn, demigod of the Forge. At the time, the brothers' bond was strong. They often fought at each other's side, even though Ornn never had quite the same lust for battle. The Volibear reveled in the hard-fought victories of his people, and as for more blood offerings were made to him, his power swelled. In time, the Volibear and his kin drifted apart, each focusing on their own pursuits. Even so, there was no true division between them, until new ideas began to usurp the old beliefs. Three sisters rose to power, seeking to control and impose order in the Freljord, and the demigods could not agree on how to proceed. A few, like Anivia, seemed inclined to work with the sisters, while the Volibear and the Iron Boar wanted to destroy them. Others would have been content to ignore them completely, since these feeble creatures would inevitably die like them before. The Volibear looked to the most animalistic and savage of his followers, known as the Ursine. With them, he would defeat the three sisters. In preparation, he sought out Ornn to arm his warriors for battle, but Ornn refused. He did not approve of the Ursine's savage ways, and a terrible fight erupted between the two demigods. In the aftermath, the Volibear cursed his brother's name and cast off his rune-inscribed armor. He would fight from then on with his tooth and claw and might and thunder. Far from being lessened, the Volibear found his full power was now unleashed. With newfound rage, he confronted one of the mortal sisters who sought to steal the power of the demigods for herself. Before her entire army, he struck her down, blinding her. But he was unable to stop what she had already set in motion. As the centuries rolled by, and despite the Volibear's resistance, tribes began to venerate and worship the three sisters instead. Many of the more ancient practices were forgotten. He saw tribes cowering behind stone walls rather than face the rawness of nature. He saw fields being tilted and farmers herding cattle rather than hunting. He bellowed in fury to see great rivers dammed rather than being allowed to roar free. This was not his Freljord. The change had slowly happened, glacially, but the Volibear finally came to realize that the tribes had been cut off from the wild spirit of the land, making them frail, complainant, and soft. These weaklings had no reverence for the old ways, nor for the old gods. Anger and determination rumbled within him. He vowed to tear down all evidence of civilization and return the Freljord to its ancient state as a true wilderness. The people would become strong once more. He would again be honored and feared by all. As the call of the Volibear reverberates across the mountains and plains of the north, more and more Freljordians are responding. Slowly, the old ways are being remembered and re-embraced, and his strength grows with each new follower. A reckoning of blood awaits, and the Volibear is rushing towards it. Valhir! The god bear twitched in his sleep, but his eyes didn't open. It was an old name, and had not been spoken aloud for how long? What he heard must have been a dream, or an echo of the past. With a snort, he burrowed his head deeper into the thick snow and continued his slumber of ages. Valhir! With your name and with this blood, I call upon you! The demigod's eyes flicked open. The voice was half a lan away, but sounded as clear as if spoken directly into his ear. With a growl, the great bear rose, pushing himself to his feet. An avalanche of snow fell from this titanic form, making the earth rumble. He shook out his fur and turned his heavy head from horizon to horizon, nostrils flaring. He could taste the blood tribute in the air, and a thrill ran through him. Somewhere, stones had been arranged to form his rune. A sacrifice had been made to his name. He felt the power of worship infusing his limbs. Valhir! I call your fury! Give us your strength! Every death is an offering! With the promise of battle, slaughter, and worship, Valhir's heart pounded in time to the war drums he could feel echoing across the land. He could hear the stamping of his feet, the clash of blades, and the cries of the dying. It called to the body he wore. It called him. The Volibear reared into his hind legs and roared to the heavens. The sound reverberated across the icy tundra, touching the soul of every living creature in the Freljord. Hundreds of miles away, where the sun never rose, a spirit walker woke screaming, clawing his face with hands twisted into immense talons. Across the ice floes, in a different direction, packs of rime-frang wolves threw back their heads and howled, echoing the demigod's cry. And elsewhere, far, far away, a group of tribesmen sitting around fires fell silent, hearts suddenly thundering. Friends eyed friends with hostile expressions. Blood would be spilled. The Volibear dropped into all four and surged forward, massive claws ripping up the frozen earth. Snow-covered boulders and trees were smashed out of his path, and the wind whistled through his thick fur as he picked up speed. When next he paused, sniffing the air, he was hundreds of miles away. He was getting close. The storm clouds of his war rage darkened the sky overhead. Valhir, we kill and die in your name! With an earth-shattering impact, the God Bear arrived. High upon an icy rise, lightning flickering across his ivory fur, he gazed across the battlefield. Two armies were engaging upon the blood-soaked plain below. The dead and dying were stewed across the snow, and one of the forces was vastly outnumbered. They were fighting a losing battle. The giant bear snorted. Something smelled wrong about the larger armies. Its human were clad in black iron and fought beneath a red banner. He growled as he realized they were not from the Freljord, but weaklings from a land where the snow no longer held sway. He bared his teeth, and lightning flashed. It struck in the midst of the battle with a deafening crash, sending charried corpses from both sides flying. Valhir! Valhir! The Volibear focused his fury-reddened gaze on the one who shouted his name. A mortal woman, clad in fur, stared up at him, her face splattered with gore. She raised a pair of bloodied axes to the sky in salute, a savage grin on her face. Many of the other combatants had ceased fighting, staring at the demigod in awe and horror. But the Volibear's attention was fixed upon the woman. This was the one whose heart had called the storm. Valhir! She screamed, thrusting her bloodied axes into the air once more. With these deaths, we honor you! With a last deferent salute, the woman turned back to fight, hurling herself into her enemy with renewed vigor. The Volibear turned his gaze upon those the woman fought, the outsiders. The enemy, with a snarl, he charged. Volkar Farah! He roared, making the heavens themselves shake. He smashed into the enemy like a living battering ram, sending their frail troops flying, bones crushed, blood splashed, voices wailed. It was over in moments. In the face of the unstoppable fury of the God Bear, the resolve of the enemy crumbled. The first of them turned to run. It quickly turned into a rout, then to butchery, as the Freljordians, now filled with the savage rage of the Volibear, fell upon the fleeing enemy like wolves, howling as they pursued them across the snow. The Volibear watched the slaughter in satisfaction, blood dripping from his maw. The woman that had called him dropped her to the knees in reverence and bowed her head. "Oh, great Valhir!" she cried. "I am a war mother Renitha, the bloodied hand. By your intervention, our village is saved." It was only then, as the Volibear's battle lust began to abate, that he knew the nearby farmsteads and stone houses, and his eyes narrowed. He turned his gaze back upon the kneeling woman. He loomed over her, easily 4 times her height, but growing ever larger as he, angered, returned to him. His almighty form was crisscrossed with old scars and the new battle wounds, all marks he bore proudly. His massive claws dripped with gore. The urge to rip and rend remained strong. He snarled down at the war mother. Valstafag dak skole! She looked up at him in confusion. It was clear the old tongue had been all but forgotten. Stand! He rumbled in the younger, bastardized language she spoke. A warrior kneels to none. His gaze settled on something further along the valley. A dangerous growl rose from deep within him, heavy with the promise of violence. The woman, Retha, took a step back, suddenly wary. "What is this?" he bellowed, the air tingling with electricity as his anger grew. The woman glanced over his shoulder, confused and uneasy. "The the dam?" she asked. The Volibear lips curled back, exposing bloodied fangs. This was his river, and it had flowed free and the wild since before the coming of humanity. That mortals dared block it. To hold back its power was an abomination. He stomped past the woman, his anger building with every step. By the time he reached the crude structure, his rage was a barely contained maelstrom, and the air around him cracked with power. War Mother Retha and the collection of others shadowed him at a wary distance. The god bear splashed into the shallows below the dam. The water barely reached past his paws, and his anger redoubled. The river should be thundering. With a roar, he tore down the stones and freed the waters. Now it thundered, bursting forth in a great churning wave. The power of the river crashed around him. There was screaming as it surged across down the flooded plain. The god bear watched in satisfaction as the first of the Freljordians' houses was smashed aside, timber shattering and stonework collapsing. People ran, clutching younglings, as the waters demolished the entire settlement. Once all evidence of civilization was gone, the Volibear turned to the Freljordians. They stood angst and aghast, shocked at what he had wrought. "Today, you are free!" He could taste fear in the air, but he also felt the awe and reverence of the onlooking mortals. "Live!" he commanded. "Live wild! Hunt! Kill! Honor the old ways! And the old ways will honor you!" War Mother Retha was now standing tall and slowly nodding. This one had the spirit of a true warrior. In his immortal heart, he knew most of the others would follow her. The Volibear gave her a nod and turned to the horizon. There is still much more to be done.